I'm going to teach you about the Pareto Principle, or the 80-20 rule, and how it applies to pretty much everything that you do, okay? It comes from a guy named Wilfred Pareto, born in 1848. Guy died in 1923, I believe. Yeah, 1848, 1923. He was an Italian economist. And in 1906, he had a theory that he started testing. He discovered that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the people. Very fascinated, he started applying this rule to a lot of business things. Around World War II, it was adopted by other global economists, and it was tested seemingly all around. And whether it was 90-10 or 70-30 or 60-40, the 80-20 rule was very, very focused and eventually brought into American businesses, essentially saying that 80% of revenue is brought in by 20% of the customers, or 20% of the products or services that a business has. I've applied this to teaching a lot of my entrepreneurs about businesses, right? They tend to focus on the small things and not really focusing on getting 80% of the results. Same way that the original iPhones and iPods used to charge about 80% in like an hour, and then it would take 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 hours to finish that last 20%. The last 20% is usually the details of anything, and you really only need about 80% or 70% of the way to do something before you get started. That's what's called an MVP, or minimum viable product. A lot of relationship issues that I see with people, that's where people get into trouble. You're probably doing about 70, 80, 90% of the things right, but the 10, 20, 30% of the things that you're not doing is really what the other person is craving. That's their 80%, if that makes sense, okay? Anyways, one of my clients, he is an amazing photographer. He's building a business, working on a lot of things, but he's also dealing with some struggles, right, in his life, just like we all are. And he was trying to figure out how to stop scrolling and spending so much time scrolling. And I said, you're deferring and you're distracting yourself. 80% of your time is going to distracting and avoiding these things that you're doing. I said, flip it. Start creating 80%, and then use that 10, 20, 30%, use that to distract yourself. But if you're not creating 80% of the time, you're doing it wrong. I said, flip the script entirely. And it totally made sense to him. And boom, now he's creating, now he's off to the races, working on his business more than he's doom scrolling and doing all of that other stuff. Anyways, I love the 80-20 rule. Think about that. I try to create 80% of the time here when I'm on social media doing stuff or building a business. And then, yeah, sure, I let myself scroll 10, 20, 30% of the time, but I keep it that script, and that's how I keep creating. That's how you eventually build a following or build a business or do anything. You create 80% of the time. There you go. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully it makes sense. See you guys in the next one.